Greetings, magical mages and spiritual sages. This is the Age of the Mage podcast, and we are on episode 77. I'd like to just revisit some ideas that have been coming in so much lately, and I think they're so important that I know I've touched on them in just recent podcasts, but let's pull it together a little bit more and think about this new Earth timeline. These timelines we're hearing about, some use the word ascension, others talk about the planet moving from 3D into 5D, and there are so many ways to describe this. The Schumann resonance is spiking, our electromagnetic grid is changing, the Earth's poles are going through adjustments. There seems to be, from all angles, no matter how it is described, massive planetary changes that, of course, will affect each one of us as we are, part of this planet and part of this process. And so, as humans, as one of the sentient species here, we, of course, will bear different kinds of responsibilities than some of the other species on the planet. And we need to take these responsibilities seriously, of course. We hear so much about this. We hear about the coming Earth changes that are possible. We hear about the effects or possible effects of these kinds of frequency changes, these vibrational shifts that we're all seeming to be experiencing. And yet what I've noticed is, as much as I have, studied and looked into these various phenomena, what's interesting to me is that I can still be caught off guard. They are still surprising to me when I feel effects from all this change happening in my own life. And I know many of you are probably going through something similar. I'll never forget when I first discovered the concept referred to as the Mandela effect. And I kind of, was exploring around online all night, just gobbling up the information. And when I hit upon a couple of those effects that I was absolutely sure of, I knew it was not any kind of false memory. I knew what I was sure of and couldn't find those, proofs any longer in our reality. It was quite a shakeup. I remember it's hard to even describe. It hits you at levels you don't normally feel, jarred at, and you just feel completely disoriented. And questions arise, of course, because what really is happening? And so then you go on that kind of search to find it out. But the bottom line is, no matter why it's happening, which is also important to investigate and question, of course, but even in spite of the reasons, the effect itself takes adjusts our psyche, and it affects our psyche. It changes us on some level to go through these kinds of shifts. And when we become cognizant of those effects, it even causes a secondary effect, a secondary type of shift in our psyche. So number one, something hits us that we're not necessarily prepared for, or we don't even know how to process, and that jars us to some extent. But then we have that secondary, effect of being shaken up when we realize, hey, something just happened, and you put it into the perspective of your language and your intelligence, and you can put it into words, and all of a sudden it takes on an added dimension. So these are not necessarily easy adjustments to make. I have read in many, I've seen in videos and read in blogs and in comments, people are experiencing various types of things, an intensity of their dreams, more vivid dreams. Those who have never dreamed are starting to dream. I've heard about physical, symptoms, more headaches, ringing in the ears, blurry vision, and even digestive, problems, issues along those lines. I've heard of mental states being affected, like more anxiety, more stress, interference from emotions like fear, taking over, these kinds of things happening. So there's just this myriad of uh, symptoms and effects that you can read about that people are going through. And I don't have any doubt that it's part of our collective shift. And these things are going to affect each one of us in unique and individual ways, perhaps according to the areas of growth or that we need to experience, or it may even some of these effects might tie into our personal gifts, our personal powers, and how those are going to be used in the future. So we might have some that we share with everybody, because the human body might share some effects just from a general type of shift, and then they might fan out and be very individual and very unique depending on different people and their current state of vibrational frequency and so on and so forth. That will affect things too. So one of these things that I've been noticing happening lately is this idea. It's starting to take hold a little bit better for me to explain it. It is definitely a phenomena that I would associate with this earth shift. And I think we're all aware that we can be affected by energy, not just physical, invasion, but we can also be affected by energetic streams, whether they be good, whether they be bad, whether they be dark, whether they be light. They can very often affect us, and we don't even know it sometimes. We can become aware, obviously, if we're in a contentious situation and we're starting to, it's starting to heat up and we're getting into arguments transitioning into a full-on fight or something. We can start to feel that anger bounce around. We're sensing that energy. You can even feel it when words aren't being used, right? That's where we get these terms like passive aggressive. We know when someone's angry at us, even when they might be claiming that that's not the case. So we have this very advanced, sensitive system that's a part of all of us. Now, sometimes we've shut it down because we've been told maybe we're oversensitive. So we start, oh yeah, I probably am just being, me. I shouldn't care so much or whatever. Sometimes we can shut it down over shame or over even being overwhelmed. Like the empaths very often feel like they have to buffer some of this because all the incoming energy can just be completely overwhelming. So there's various ways that it could get dampened, or this system we might be out of practice with working with it. We may have consciously shut it down in some cases, but it can be reopened. It can be, cleaned up, and we can learn how to work with this extensive sensory, these filaments that we have going out from our field, our physical to the auras, to the various bodies we have. It just keeps extending outwards and outwards. And we can learn how to work with it. We can learn how to shield this space. We can learn how to move energy through the space. We can learn how to transform energy as it comes in and as it goes out of our space. There's so much that can be done with this etheric field that surrounds us. And we will definitely be talking in the future a lot more about specifics of what exercises to do, various things, to increase our ability to work with this field. But for today, I wanted to mention that I've had a series of events happen, and now I'm getting reports from more than just one person that they are having similar things happen. And the way I can kind of distill this down is to say that we understand that we have this bubble as sages, as mages, as spiritual light workers, as galactics. We are aware of this space, okay? And I think many of us take great pains and precautions to shield this area or to respect this space around us. And I think that's pretty commonplace among us. Now, what is kind of an added part of the picture that's coming into play here is that perhaps we haven't paid as much attention to connecting lines where we sit, so to speak, on a web, where we exist inside of a network, that we are truly this node of energy, but that we have all these energy strands feeding out from us that connects us to existing webs and existing networks In some cases, it might be people like friends and family. In other cases, it might be ideologies, it might be belief systems, it might be constructs, it might be objects like your home. All these, lines of energy, they leave our field and communicate on some level and connect us to these various things all around. And some things are not even, they don't need to be in your personal space to be connected through this type of etheric network. You could have a very strong line of connection with someone that you care deeply about, and that person might be clear across the world, or that person may have even passed on into another dimension, and yet that line is very strong and very connected. So we even have these connections to unseen realms. We have connections to our past, to other parts of us that might be simultaneously existing in other realms or visiting realms in our dreams. So we have all kinds of attachments that leave our personal energy bubble and, reach outwards and do connect all around us. And I've found that because of these latest events, I have tended to overlook these connections. When I work on something like shielding, I tend to focus on more of this bubble idea, and that it's me, protect me, I see myself in the center of it, or if I'm shielding or protecting my home, or if I'm shielding or protecting an animal or a loved one. And I have not really paid attention to this extended type of protection, like saying, oh, and I'm going to go in the car today, and I'm going to go from point A to point B, and I do this protection on myself and my car as I head out. But I have tended to overlook, please protect the pathways. Please, in whatever way you utilize protection or think about it, you might ask yourself, is this part of your typical, so to speak, ritual with regards to protection? Do you tend to think about all these connecting lines of energies, whether it's an actual street, an actual pathway, or whether it's an etheric connection, or whether it's something like a phone line or an Ethernet line in your computer, or a wireless network connection? All these virtual types of networks, these are not an accident that they're being so highly developed at this time in our world. The 3D world mirrors the magical world, and right back again, the magical world reflects the 3D world. And so when we see an emphasis on more and more wireless technology, this is an emphasis on networking that is growing in our spiritual space as well as in our physical space. So on some level, the human psyche as a collective is desiring to merge the true network that exists between us in a spiritual and etheric way, to actually see this come more and more and more into our 3D world through these invisible means of wireless networking and so on. So none of this is an accident, right? This is a reflection of our evolution as a whole. And yes, we may be making mistakes along the way. We might be choosing some tools of technology that are not as good for us as they could be in various things, but overall, this desire that the human has to be connected is coming into play, and we're seeing it, be actually developed and utilized in our world now. So we perhaps, because all of this is fairly new to us, when we think about it, it wasn't very many years ago that we added the telephone, to our we upgraded from the telegraph, and we added the telephone, and then we went from the radio into the television world, right? And so now we've had this other leap, and we started connecting through the internet, but we still needed cords to do that. And all of a sudden, there's this big leap now to what we've seen through Wi-Fi, and these leaps keep coming faster and faster with less time in between each significant advancement. And this is again a sign of what the overall Earth human species is aware of subconsciously, that we have already these existing type of web between us, and we are actually bringing this into our world. Now that's happening, but at the same time, we may not be practiced with the idea of what it means to bring such a web into our world. So we've spent a lot of time in kind of our own little universe. We've spent all these thousands of years as, being able to concentrate on our personal space and perhaps our small little family unit. And then maybe that extended out to some tribe and some extended family, and eventually even worked its way into community thought and national types of issues, right? So, but to start realizing how connected we truly are is a new concept. Now, I know it is ancient when you look into mystery schools or you look back into some ancient tenets that have been associated with religion. But for the world as at large, this concept is fairly new in our modern era. And so we are to some extent unprepared, perhaps for some of the side effects. And so we see articles like, oh, the downside to social media. And we're aware of this, it's a little bit too much information going around all the time. It's a little bit too easy to connect with not just your own friends, but people you don't know. And pretty soon you have these landslides of negativity coming at you, or false positives, and all kinds of things can happen. And so here we are, blessed with this absolutely wonderful gift of global connectivity, and yet we haven't been fully prepared on how to use that. We're going through, our adolescence with it. We're having growing pains. We're learning, and we're finding out what works about it and what doesn't work, and what helps us and what doesn't necessarily help. So that's part of the growing process. Well, the same thing I think is happening in the etheric network world. So when we are aware of these little units ourselves, and we have spent a lot of time learning how to shield and guard those units, we perhaps have neglected the extensions out from us. And what I think is a symptom of the coming changes, one phenomenon that we will see, is that there's less boundary, there's less insulation around everything as we move from less density into, we move from greater density to less density. So we raise our vibration and frequency, and the density rises, or the density is reversed, the density lessens, and maybe we're used to a little thicker skin, so to speak, surrounding us. Maybe we're used to, like, if you think of it as electrical wires on a grid, and they have been in the past all, wrapped up nicely in these rubber casings or something, and then all of a sudden that's stripped away, and all of a sudden these electric wires are kind of open, or maybe they're just wrapped lightly, with some kind of fabric. And that makes them a lot more accessible to passing energies. So something like this, I believe, is going on. As our networks become more a part of us, and we actually lose in the 3D world some of our healthy boundaries, and some maybe not so healthy, but as we face those issues in our real world, I believe we're facing them in the invisible realm as well. And that these kind of boundaries that have been set up by our stage of reality that we were in may be starting to slide away. And so we can not only be touched more easily by energy, by strands of energy, as a unit, as a person, as an event, but we could also be hijacked along these pathways more easily. And I'm not to say these are all attacks either. When you have the kind of things going on in our world that we currently have, and we're going to grow from this eventually. But right now, when we have these things happening, there's a lot of chaos energy. There's a lot of things that are unsettling and unsettled. There are many things up in the air right now. And so this produces a lot of chaos energy. Now, if you are a a little light bulb and you're just screwed into your socket and you're all protected around every area, and the wire that connects you to the wall is in a great, healthy condition and is rubberized and plugs right into the source, you're not going to feel too much that chaos energy blowing around the room. You're just going to shine your light bulb as normal because all the things are in place that you're used to working with. But what if that light bulb were unscrewed just a little bit? You know how lights will go in and out if they're not just firmly screwed into place. What if that cord was no longer, those copper wires were no longer wrapped up with rubber? What if they were just hanging loose and lightly plugged into the wall? You can see where things like a drop of water could be a big deal now, or a breeze that brings a bunch of dust particles your way, right? Or a dog or cat that trips over the cord. These things all of a sudden take on some new aspects because of the state of affairs, because of the state that they have moved into. And this is a symptom, I believe, of our time and our coming time that some of us haven't even prepared for. I mean, and that's part of what change does, right? You can think ahead all you want, but then when the change hits, unexpected things happen. That's part of it. And you gotta quickly, recoup and reassess and move forward because you didn't expect that, right? I think this is going to be one of those things. So all of a sudden we have these etheric networks and webs that are going out from us, and they're just catching a lot of debris. Yes, they're also more open to things like direct and intentional attack too. But they're swinging around out there, right? In a world full of chaos, and perhaps do not have the same level of natural protection they had at a when they were in a heavier density. So it becomes our responsibility, doesn't it? It moves into the realm of magic or spirit and personal sovereignty and personal responsibility to start learning how to work on this. And again, the sky's the limit. Like, there's so many individual ways to do this. Some of you may just want to ask for help from divine alliances you have. Others will feel very capable of working in the etheric realm themselves and producing constructs that will add extra protection to their outgoing links. So it doesn't matter how you approach it, but the knowledge that it's happening could be very vital and could even save your life. As I told my story about some very near auto accidents, I was told, hey, you're not going to get home unless you do something about these pathways that you have neglected to enhance with protection. What if this becomes a common way of living? We could see an awful lot of chaos break out with those who are not accustomed to thinking about any of these things and are not prepared to know how to work on these things, right? Because all of a sudden things aren't going right. It's like Mercury in retrograde on steroids. It's like 10 times worse than that, and it doesn't leave. It never leaves. It's not a 3-week period of time. All of a sudden, it's a new part of reality. And people will question, what is going on? This little process here that I do, I've always been able to do. This has never been hard. Why can't this work? Right? But it can also extend to things that could actually put you in danger. I believe that as magical practitioners and as spiritual workers, we can actually help lead the way in these type of areas. This is going to be one of the ways that we can contribute to society in these coming years through these changes that we're going to be seeing. We have to first recognize patterns starting to come and say, aha, there is a pattern here. Let's look more closely at it. And then we can have to assess moving from whether it's a pattern that will pass or whether it's a pattern that is going to become an actual phenomena and actually be associated with us on a more permanent basis. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing this move from a pattern into a possible phenomena. I believe it warrants our consideration. I think we need to look at it and think about it And just go ahead for the time being and take some extra precautions. Include your pathways in your blessings. At least start there, and then start to notice, what are other people telling you that's happening in their lives? Do their stories confirm that this is becoming a new phenomenon that could be associated with our new Earth frequencies? I'm really going to be interested to see what you think and how you perceive this. But in the meantime, I want to send you this message because I think that we should, at the very least, take some extra precautions and be aware this is a possibility, and start in our own way, whatever feels most comfortable to us, getting this extra protection in place. Now, one more word about it. It could be overwhelming to think like, oh, I have to protect an entire web. I'm an infinite being. I mean, I don't know how to do that. That just goes on and on for miles in every direction. True. And so that perhaps is going to require some deeper thought, and we'll continue to think on that. But for the time being, I've given this some thought too, and I think that if we narrow this down, we can get better at least the basic skills that we're going to need. And that is to say, at least isolate incidents. Start isolating events. If you are going to go somewhere in your car, bless your starting point and bless your ending point and bless the intermediate pathways, and encapsulate it in that event. And that way it's something that's kind of bite-sized. You can handle that. You can envision that protection period of time or event. It could be time too if you're going to be on a vacation for a week and you want your home protected while you are gone. You could go ahead and connect your protection to that timeline, to that week, that entire week, the time-space continuum, as you think about protecting your home, so that it extends beyond just the idea of the home unit itself. And of course, do a similar thing for yourself as you go on to that vacation. So it could be an event that you surround with protection. It could be a time period. It could be a link that you have to a specific thing, like a person. Protect yourself, protect the person, and then also protect the lines that exist between you. It could be a virtual type of network. Many of you have lovely websites and blogs, and you also share things on social media and things like that. Protect that place that you go. Protect that portal, because that's definitely opening up into the whole world. So protect your site, protect your portal, protect the voice you use when you speak or when you share a comment. But then think about the incoming lines. Think about those that might see that comment or that blog, and bless those lines as well. This, I believe, is going to save us as magicians a lot of heartache when it comes to this growing phenomena of hijacking and hacking. Again, we see hacking beginning to show up in our 3D world. I believe this is just going to increase as we keep moving to these higher frequencies, because it again reflects what's happening in the spiritual plane, and we're just tied. The physical plane is deeply tied and reflective of that spiritual plane. So now that these lines up in the etheric realms are less protected or less insulated and can be affected more easily, you could call that hacking, right? It may not even be on purpose. Where now we're going to start seeing it in our physical realm, where it's going to get easier and easier to hack. We're going to hear more about cyber attacks, more about network hacking, because it is a phenomena that goes with losing boundaries. Losing boundaries that have been in place, perhaps put in place by a creator or by an energy system, that now, this is just a thought, but maybe we are being asked to step up and define those boundaries for ourselves. As we evolve, we're going to become more and more like the creator. We are creators, and we will need to learn the lessons that go along with advanced creation. And this is a part of that, perhaps. I leave all these thoughts with you. looking forward to hearing back when you have thoughts about them. And I will return soon again with another message, and I will say goodbye for now.